Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. I was sitting in my favorite place and waiting to meet a friend. It's just a small covered terrace on the shore of Spa Creek in Annapolis. But in summer, it can become the most interesting place on earth. The harbor is busy. People go ashore to have dinner. Water taxis take them between Annapolis and Eastport. And sometimes drunken revelers step off the sidewalk and fall into the harbor. There is no end to entertainment, and all this can be obtained for just one mug of beer. My friend Dave called me that afternoon and asked me to meet him after work. It wasn't exactly like him. Dave likes to stay at home in the evenings more, but so do I, so his call surprised me. Something told me that this would not be an ordinary social evening with beer, nachos, and bad jokes. I saw him a block away and he didn't look good. Dave looked so sad, as if his dog had died, he had lost his job, and his wife had run away. Well, at least one of the three. He sat down at my table and we looked at each other for a long time. Do you want to talk about it? He just sat and stared at the water, slightly opening his mouth and slowly shaking his head. You know, when a man shakes his head like that, he doesn't say no. He thinks, how could this happen to me? He was silent for a long time and then, sighing, quietly said, She's cheating on me, Steve. Then he looked into my eyes and said, I can't believe it. She is the last woman on earth who I thought would be capable of such a thing. Like that. I knew it was going to be bad, and I hoped it wasn't that bad, but I heard it in his voice on the phone earlier in the day and saw it in his walk along the edge of the harbor. Either his wife cheated on him or the doctor sentenced him to death. To be honest, I was glad it was the first one. Dave is a good guy, and the world would be a smaller place without him. You know you don't deserve this, Dave. That's not what you did. I've known you too long, and I know it's not your fault. There are rules in marriage, and no path that follows the rules leads to betrayal. The path may lead to unhappiness, it may lead to divorce, but there is no excuse for betrayal. Then why do I feel like such a loser? Well, I can tell you what I've learned about myself if it helps. We go through life with bravado and stupidity, thinking that everything is fine, enjoying life, and then we meet someone who teaches us how inferior we are without him. We let them in, see ourselves through their eyes, and our value is linked to their love for us. And then one day they teach us that we are not what they always thought we were. We catch them lying to us, disrespecting us, breaking promises they made to us, finding with someone else what we thought they could only find with us, and it all falls apart. My friend looked at me in amazement. Have you been through this? You never told me. Who wants to talk about it? If I had divorced Debbie, I would have told everyone and cursed her name, but it wasn't like that. I was lucky. She had a short period of stupidity, immaturity, and when her head cleared, she realized that marriage was above all for her. It wasn't easy, but we gradually built a relationship. I think it helped that she confessed, and I never caught her. If I saw her doing it, I don't think I could forgive her. We were before, and we are here again now. It's not that we were unhappy with each other. Debbie had self-doubt, some misplaced sense of inadequacy, and this bastard played on her needs and weaknesses until she did what she swore she would never do. And with that, I started telling him my story, a story that I had never told anyone, because by telling it, I was making it real, and I never wanted it to be real. Well, you know part of our story. We were school sweethearts. We started dating back in high school and have been inseparable since our first night. You know us. She wasn't a cheerleader and I wasn't an athlete. We were nerds, but we were also excellent students. I never liked the term nerd, but over the years we both went to college, where we excelled. We found a great job, moved up the ranks quickly, and established ourselves in society. Of course, we were nerds at school, but like many nerds, we have achieved great success in our careers. There was one big difference between Debbie and me. Maybe this is due to the need for women to belong to society, to be included in its life. I don't know. You see, being nerds, we had friends, but we were never considered cool guys. I endured the usual bullying from athletes, just like the rest of the regular students, but I just thought less about them because of it. There were girls who interacted with athletes, and they enjoyed all the bullying and insults, but for some reason I never considered them important or even a part of my life. They were like the thistles and thorns that I had to go through when I was walking in the woods. It was just a payment for moving forward. Debbie longed to be accepted by the crowd. She knew perfectly well what they were, but she saw the attention they received from many students and teachers. She just wanted to fit in with this crowd and knew she didn't fit in. There were several cases when one or another athlete paid semi-serious attention to her. I never liked the way she perked up when they did it. I understood that for them it was just entertainment, maybe a small conquest, but it became brighter and suddenly I ceased to exist. She always came to her senses, except when she met with a football player and told me that her family had their own plans. After that, I was estranged from her for 6 weeks. I'm done with her. It took her all these 6 weeks to get back in my good graces, and I decided that I had achieved my goal. There is one more thing about Debbie that you already know, although you would never have heard it from me. She has a flat chest. I looked at him and for a moment regretted saying that. I felt like I had betrayed her. If you haven't figured it out yet, I don't give a damn about any of this. I love this woman, and all I've ever asked of these beautiful flat breasts is that they be mine and mine alone. It's very important, you know? It doesn't matter what she looks like, it matters what she is. And my wife is a woman with all the modesty that she or any other woman needs. I love this woman. As I said, over the years we have been moving up the career ladder, building our lives as adults. All this school nonsense was left far behind in the rearview mirror. At least that was the case for me, and I thought it was for Debbie too. I was wrong. All these years through college and our careers, she carried a piece of that school anger buried deep in her psyche. It was like a ticking bomb, and when it was pushed, it exploded. I took a minute to collect my thoughts. I've come to the most painful part. We planned our lives. Nerds do that. We had a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, and we were coming to the end of our 5-year plan. We were planning to start a family soon. Here's what every man needs to understand about women. At any moment and for any reason, they can decide to make love, and if all they decide, they will. It doesn't matter if she's married or single, pretty or not, stylish or overweight. They wake up in the morning, put their feet on the floor, and if they say to themselves, "Today I want to unwind a little. I think I'll make love," they will do so. Even though men brag, they don't have that kind of power. Men work for weeks or months to seduce a woman. The woman simply decides, and the man readily obeys. If a married woman intends to be faithful to her husband and her vows, she must make this decision every day, because there is always a wolf lurking in the bushes, ready to pounce on an unsuspecting sheep. If she has a bad day, if she feels unappreciated at home, if she has gained a few pounds or quarreled with her husband, this makes her even more vulnerable to his approach. He would become her friend, flatter her, tell her that she was not appreciated, and work on this little gap in her armor until she began to believe him. The wolf outside my door was called Peter. We've known him since high school, and you know this guy. We've all met them. He went to school doing enough to make ends meet. He played football and was a star on the team. He was the center of social life at school, a person who needed to be known, and when he graduated, he continued to behave the same way, relying on his personality rather than any tangible talent. He graduated from college with mediocre grades in an uninteresting specialty. After all, Peter got a job as a salesman, but who else could he be? He started visiting my wife's company regularly, courting the office manager and establishing personal relationships with senior management. He was attentive to every opportunity and quickly noticed my wife. I'm just guessing, but it probably went something like this. "Debbie Allen, it's you?" She probably blushed and looked away for a moment, then turned in his direction and said with a smile, "Peter?" He probably said something like, "It's you. Oh my God, you're even more beautiful than you were at school." God, I hear his cute voice in my nightmares. Who knows what he really thought? The truth was not his weapon. He would talk to her about her work, flatter her a little, and then reluctantly go to the meeting. He could even ask her to show him the way. Then, after the meeting, he would come back to end the conversation, smiling all the time, complimenting her, but not too much, and ending up like this. "I would not like to leave, but I have another appointment. I'll be back next Tuesday. Will you come? I'd like to end our conversation. I'm so glad to see you again." As I said, I wasn't there, but I'm sure that's what happened. He started off innocuously enough, trying not to cause any alarms that would make her feel uncomfortable. Seduction of a married woman is a gradual matter. It's all about making her feel safe and relaxing her inhibitions. Real predators can recognize their prey at a glance. He got to know her without making anything special out of it. He flattered her and put himself in her position by asking for help. He thanked her for her kindness. The first invitation to lunch followed only a few weeks later. Of course, she is a married woman, so she refused, but he became a regular visitor to the office. She knew him. He was safe. He was polite. He appreciated her. On good days, he kept her in good spirits, and on bad days, he was the bright spot that lifted her spirits. He always needed some help, and he always wanted to thank her. After all, it was rude of her not to let him invite her to lunch. It was all very innocent. At least that's how she finally described it to me. Just sitting here and thinking about it, the anger came back to me. You leave such things behind, but you never really forget. Betraying a loved one is painful and hard, but the same love can help you get through it. I have never been able to come to terms with the fact that there is a predator in the world who does not think anything about me or my marriage. My wife was just another notch on his pillar, and if her infidelity had led to the destruction of my marriage, then his achievement would have been even more significant. He turned me into nothing more than another humiliated husband whom he bypassed and whom I have never forgiven. In the end, how and with what he seduced her is not so important. He was smooth and took his time. Wherever he went, people seemed to know him. For the first time in her life, she felt at the center of the social world, and she liked it. It satisfied a long-suppressed need in her heart. For a long time, he didn't do anything inappropriate. These were small steps. There was nothing that could cause alarm, but gradually she began to fail the test for a faithful wife. If only she had ever asked herself, would I have behaved like this if Steve had been here? She would have realized that she was crossing the line. That was his talent. He could work with her in a way that she never asked herself that question. He made his move when I was away for work for 1 week. She agreed to meet him for dinner. After all, it was all innocent, and there was nothing to feel guilty about. She just forgot to tell me about it. She never talked about her dinner plans and all those dinners. Dinner was delicious, so a little dancing wouldn't hurt. After all, they were in public. What could have happened? She never told me how they made the deal, and honestly, I don't think I want to know. But she spent that night in his hotel room, and everything we built together collapsed around us. To her credit, guilt overcame her. I returned home a few nights later and found her crying in the living room. She was in a terrible state. It took an hour to get a clear offer from her. She kept saying, "I'm so sorry. I love you. I never wanted to." And Peter, but nothing else. I could understand what she was trying to say. And who the hell was this Peter? When she was completely exhausted and cried herself out, she collapsed on top of me and clung to my chest like a drowning man in the waves. She continued to sob softly and finally told me what she had done. Every married man knows that this cannot happen. It happens to others. It happens to their friends, but it can never happen to them. They got married well. Their wife is a rock. She's not some kind of cheater. She knows what she wants and will never change. It's not in her nature. They are completely unprepared for this when it happens. They begin to deny it. They get furious. They shut themselves in. Eventually, they start looking for a way to get revenge. They want their wife to be hurt as much as they are because it's obvious that she's not hurt enough. In the end, she changed that. They're crying. They're screaming. They break out of the house and rent a hotel room, vowing to find a lawyer. I've been doing all this. If a man has good friends and close family to bring them back to the world, and if he has a wife who sincerely regrets what she did, then eventually they can find their way home. Their self-confidence is destroyed. Their trust in her has evaporated. They wonder, how many times? They start all over again with the same woman who has already betrayed them. It's pure hell, played out in a house that can't be big enough to hide from the pain for at least one evening. But love finds a way out if they are lucky, and if they both try to make it happen. They are trying to heal the pain and restore the destruction. It took us a year. For the first 3 months, we slept in different rooms. Then for another month, we slept in the same bed without touching each other. Whether it was modesty or shame, I never saw her naked body during those first 4 months. She changed for bed in the bathroom and put on nightgowns. In the afternoon and evening, she stood at arm's length, asked if I needed anything, offered me a snack, and just waited for me to forgive her. It wasn't a happy home. Over time, I realized that she needed forgiveness as desperately as I needed her forgiveness. I wanted my wife back. We both wanted to get our marriage back, the old marriage where we were comfortable and good together. We went to a therapist. We were talking. We fought. Well, I struggled. She basically took verbal blows until I was exhausted to fight on. One night I was just sitting on the couch and thinking about how my life had turned to shit. She sat down next to me and gently rested her head on my shoulder. For the first time in 4 months, I smelled her hair. It caused a wave of memories and desires. I moved slowly to put my hand on her shoulder, but she jumped up, thinking I was pulling away. When she saw that this was not the case, she hugged me and we spent the evening just sitting and not talking. When we went to bed, we hugged again. We were just together. It was the first intimacy we felt in 4 long and painful months. 6 months after the healing, we enjoyed our time together again. We were both nervous and unsure of ourselves. The memories were still fresh, but we knew that the door was open and we were both walking through it together. We desperately wanted to be on the other side of healing, but something held me back. There was unfinished business, and I knew this was the only time I wouldn't sit back and let a tough guy win. I hesitated for a while before finishing my story. What I'm going to tell you, you can't tell a single living soul. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. It's just that if you tell anyone, I could go to jail. Dave nodded, and I looked around to see if anyone was eavesdropping. I lowered my voice so that only Dave could hear. I knew when Peter was in town. My wife made sure that I knew. It was part of our no secrets policy. Well, it was either that or surveillance of her office, and I couldn't afford it. Telling me when Peter visited her office, when he talked to her, and what he said was what I needed to restore my trust in her. She was honest about it. He was working on it, trying to repeat their night together. Despite this, I felt relieved. She finally saw him for who he was, and I was no longer afraid that he had power over her. She told me that every time he worked on her, she felt cheap, like she was just a piece of meat. That's when I realized I had my girl back. Peter was a creature of habit and was ordinary in his studies. By that, I mean he was hunting pussies. If one girl was unavailable, he would look for another. He always stayed at the same hotel but hunted in several bars. Sometimes he won. Some nights he would fail. Some parking lots were dimly lit. I could afford to be patient. Peter could be fast and agile on the football field, but he couldn't dodge a metal pipe to save his life, or his knees, as it turned out. To his credit, it was dark, and someone came up behind him before he knew it. Dave looked at his friend with renewed gratitude. No, don't look at me like that. I was playing poker with 3 friends all that night. I even lost $1.50 to each of them, exactly $1.50 to each of them. I was generous and paid in advance. I looked into my friend's eyes and saw that he understood everything. Here's the thing. You can only heal a marriage with a spouse who wants to heal it with you, and you won't know if you have such a spouse until you run into him. Come clean and find out if he still wants to get what he lost in the gambling. You're not Superman, and you're not perfect, so you need to forgive yourself for all the stupid things you've done, and for all the stupid things you're going to do before it's over. In the end, either she admits her wrongdoing and does the hard work with you, or you don't lose as much as you think. You won't know until you start. My friend looked just as bad as when he first sat down at the table, but he was nodding. He understood. For better or worse, he knew what he had to do. One more thing. I looked back again to make sure we weren't being overheard. Revenge doesn't solve anything, but it gives back what was taken from you. So if you follow my advice, don't get caught. First of all, take care of your marriage. You have more questions than answers, at least as far as the important questions are concerned. Go get answers and ask yourself what you want and what you don't agree to. Remember that none of you can change the past. You can only live in the future. Find out what the future has to offer before making any decisions. Will the pain ever stop? I looked at my friend. I can say that the pain decreases over time and it hurts less often. After a while, it's almost like a memory of pain, not the pain itself. At least that's what it seems to me now. But I have a wife who deeply regrets what she did. You need to figure out what you have before you make any decisions. We spent the next hour sipping beer, and then we both went home. I went home to my loving wife, my friend and partner from school years, whom I had lost and now found. Dave went home to the unknown. No matter what he found there, he knew that there were friends in his life that he could turn to. He wasn't alone. That's all. Sometimes a marriage fails and sometimes it can be saved. Sometimes a cheating spouse deserves revenge, and sometimes they both deserve to feel whole again. It all depends on what they both want most, and on their willingness to trust again. David's story. How did my life fall apart so quickly? I got up this morning a happily married man, grateful for a loving and beautiful wife. Anyway, she's beautiful in my eyes. Tonight I'm going home to the wife who betrayed me, and I do not know why or how often or even who he is. I saw him and I saw them together, so I know she cheated on me, but that's all I know. Maybe I should explain. My name is David. When and where I met my wife, where we live, what I do for a living, none of this matters. I'm just a guy who loved his wife and now knows she's not the woman he thought she was. You're probably wondering how I got to this state? I got up this morning. The love of my life was sleeping next to me. I took a quick shower, got dressed, and woke up my wife. It was an ordinary weekday morning. I usually grab a cup of yogurt and go to work about 45 minutes before my wife, so I walked out the door when she had already started taking a shower. I usually pack my lunch and have a snack about once a week somewhere near the office. I was going for a walk today. I had a good morning at work, so no complaints yet. Around 11:20 a.m., I wanted a fried steak with chicken. It happens to me once a month or two. I know it's unhealthy food, but when I feel like it, I go to Denny's and have fried steak with hash browns, sourdough bread, orange juice, and coffee for breakfast. In other words, I get breakfast for lunch. Today was supposed to be one of those days. It's a 20-minute drive, but I got to Denny's before the dining crowd and sat by the window. I was halfway to lunch and watching people, as I like to do when I'm alone, when I happened to glance across the street. That's when it happened. I saw my wife get out of the car, kiss a man I'd never seen, and walk hand in hand into a motel room. Life does not prepare you for this. The first thing that happens is the mind turns off. I just sat and stared, not believing what I saw. Then the mind goes to an increased speed. He jumps from one idea to another. Did I really see it? Was it really my wife? Maybe she's cheating? Is there any other plausible reason for what I just saw? The next stage is denial. No, it can't be her. There is a good reason for this. I'm jumping to conclusions. I grabbed my phone and called her. She answered on the third ring. Hello, dear. Is everything okay? Yes, I just wanted to ask, where are you? It wasn't very subtle, was it? She hesitated and then replied, I'm at my desk, as always. We'll work until lunch and maybe I'll be home late at night. She lied to me and she had never done that before. Really? I went into zombie mode, talking but not thinking, almost muttering. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I'll probably go. And with that, I hung up the phone. After thinking about it, she probably thought it was weird, but she didn't call me back. I was no longer sure of anything, especially what I had seen with my own eyes. I sat there for a few more minutes, more in shock than anything else. It's funny how slow the mind works at such moments. It probably took me 5 minutes to get off my ass and go see what was going on. A man who trusts his wife is in no hurry to accuse and is almost as slow to spy. I threw $1.20 on the table and left the restaurant. Looking back, I'm surprised I was smart enough not to go out on the road, but I crossed the road safely and walked out into the motel parking lot. I checked the car and it was her car. Then, after looking at the room, I walked towards it as if I were approaching a sleeping lion. I knew that only death awaited me there. I went to the window, and like in most motel rooms, the cheap curtains didn't close completely. I looked inside through the gap between the curtains and saw that my marriage was dying. My mind exploded with images of revenge. I wanted to break into the room and beat him to death. I wanted to drive her car through the door. I wanted to die. But here's the strange thing. Where shock and uncertainty turn off the brain, confidence leads to such clarity of thought as I have rarely experienced. My pain went away for a short time, and it was replaced by clear thinking. I needed proof. The woman in the room and the man she was with became abstract things, and their actions were just problems that I needed to document. I took my cell phone and took them off through the curtains. I took a picture of my wife's car next to his car, against which the door to their room was clearly visible. Then, calmly, suppressing the pain and rage, I returned to Denny's and ordered another cup of coffee. Only later, sitting by the window and watching the motel door, the reality of her actions flooded my mind, and the pain returned. I finally broke down, humiliating myself in front of a room full of strangers, and crying like a child. The waitresses tried to comfort me. The chefs came out to see if they could help. Complete strangers held out their hands to me. I brushed them off and said that my wife was cheating on me, and I just found out about it. I don't think anyone had a nice lunch that day, but it's amazing how complete strangers reach out to share your pain while others completely ignore you. I sat there until they left, and both left in the same direction. I thought maybe they worked together and travel separately so as not to become an excuse for office gossip. I had strange moments of amazing clarity, intertwined with rage and pain. I grabbed my phone, checked if I had videos and photos, and called my friend Steve. Eventually, I went back to my office and tried to work, but I was just killing time. At the usual hour, I left and went to meet my friend. Over a few beers, he told me about the pain his wife's infidelity had caused him, and how they had rebuilt their marriage. He told me that it was possible to heal a marriage, but that we would both have to do hard work together to do it, and that I would never know it was possible until I ran into her. He was right. Thoughts of revenge, of lawyers, of wanting to send the video to everyone I knew, including her family, were still running through my head, but I knew that first I needed answers to the questions I was still trying to formulate. I was driving home with conflicting thoughts. I wanted to strangle her, but I also wanted to beg her not to leave me. I had to show her the evidence, but try to be patient and speak with love. I needed to resolve my conflicting desires before I returned home, so a block away from our apartment, I stopped and tried to calm down and collect my thoughts. I made some simple decisions, knowing full well that I couldn't control the confrontation. I could only know my own mind, and my mind was saying that I would not share. I would no longer be lied to, and I would not be humiliated. I couldn't control the rest. With clear thoughts, I drove the last block to our house. She greeted me with her usual warm and loving hugs and a kiss that almost made me vomit. "What's wrong, David? Did you have a bad day at work? Did something happen to Steve and Debbie?" "No, not with them, it's us." "Do you understand what I mean, Barb? Just the three of us?" "The three of us? What are you talking about, silly? I'm not pregnant yet." "You damn well better not be. I'm not talking about the baby, Barb. I mean you and your boyfriend. I saw you at the Starlight Motel today. I filmed you through the window. I know, Barb, I know." I've heard that a person's face can turn pale from shock, but I've never seen it happen. She turned white, lost consciousness, and collapsed on the floor. At that moment, I felt ashamed of myself. I knew that I had already let my temper get out of control, but now my wife was lying unconscious on the floor at my feet, and I just stood and looked at her. I was still her husband, and had to start behaving accordingly. I knelt down, picked her up in my arms, and gently laid her on the sofa. A cool, wet cloth was applied to her forehead, and soon she came to her senses. She was defeated, sat quietly on the couch, and looked at the floor. "How did you know?" "Does it matter?" "I think not. We thought we were so careful. Cheaters are always caught in the end." It was a lie, and I knew it. Many scammers get away with everything, but this knowledge did not bring me any comfort. "Who is he?" "I won't tell you." I knew it was a bad sign. We weren't going to get out of this situation unscathed if she kept secrets and controlled the flow of information. I took out my phone and started playing the video I had made earlier that day. "Tell me who he is, or we don't have a future." She was broken and looked at me with pitying eyes. "Do we have a future now? I cheated on you. No one forgives this." I knew she was wrong about nobody, but she might well be right about us. I was trying to get my emotions under control. I restrained myself and began to speak patiently and calmly. "I met with Steve today. He and Debbie went through this a year ago. We can fix everything. We can rebuild our marriage." This made her cry even harder. She didn't deny anything, and I prepared to ask the main question. "Do you want us to be together again?" She shrugged her shoulders. Did that mean that she didn't know or that she didn't want to talk? I just sat there and looked at her. Over time, we sat side by side, not talking, not looking at each other, just sitting. Finally, I decided to repeat the question. "Do you want to connect us again, Barb?" She just burst into screams and tears, jumped off the couch, ran into our bedroom, and slammed the door. I saw no reason to follow her. I just sat there lost in self-pity. Half an hour later, she came out, dragging her suitcase with her. She walked to the door without saying a word, then turned, looked at me, and silently left our apartment. Looks like I got the answer. The next week was nothing but hell. I went to the office and tried to bury my thoughts in work, but I was not very successful. I told my boss about my situation and told my colleagues. I wasn't trying to hide anything. Someone might say that I should be somehow ashamed that my wife turned to another man, but I kept my vow. I didn't hide my betrayal. Dinner turned into a burger in a cafe, and my evenings were beer and TV, which I practically ignored. I wondered why she left so quickly. Was this always part of her plan? Was she so ashamed that she had to run away? Did she love him? Has she ever loved me? That's the kind of thing betrayal does to a person. My rescue came a week after the confrontation with Barb. By that time, I had already gone to a lawyer and started to process the documents. I knew she was living with that jerk, and I didn't need to know anymore. David was right. You can't rebuild a marriage alone. I was sitting in my apartment and thinking about infidelity. It's so weird, isn't it? You spend years with a person, build a life together, take care of each other, treat him for diseases and rejoice in his successes. It's such a small thing compared to living together. And yet that's it. Then I finally understood. It's not about wanting to experience another man. In every sexual act, there comes a moment when a man wants to make his partner his own. He spews his seed into her, and with all his being wants to assert his masculinity, prove his potency, and make her pregnant. For her part, she accepts him, and at this last moment longs for his child. This is the real act of betrayal. Everyone wants to get a piece of the other. Lying and deception are bad enough, but the real act of betrayal is the moment when the animal self takes over, longing for unity with this other person. This feeling may pass, and it often has to be denied afterwards, but it lies at the heart of every act of infidelity. How can a husband put up with this if her desire is someone else? I was feeling sorry for myself as usual when the doorbell rang. I hoped and feared that it was Barb, trembling as I went to the door and opened it. The sight that greeted me brought a smile to my face for the first time in a week. "Denise, what are you doing here?" Denise and I have been friends since high school. She is a red-haired beauty with fiery eyes. She had moments of sudden anger or unbridled humor, but no matter what, she always remained my faithful friend. I considered asking her out a few times when I was single, but either she was infatuated or I was dating someone else. She came to our wedding and knew my wife well. She has always been a bright spot in my life. "Is it possible to greet a girl like that? I've come all this way." Her accent was exaggerated. She was smiling her warm smile, and all her barbs spoke of her good mood. "Come in, please. I'd like to see a friendly face for just a few minutes." We sat down on the couch, and before I could say anything sensible, she said, "I've heard about Barb. I am so sorry. If it's any consolation, I think she's an idiot. Actually, it helps a lot. I can't tell you how much self-doubt I had. I go to work and just do my job, and then I sit here and feel sorry for myself." She held my hand and rested her head on my shoulder. We sat like this for about an hour, talking and laughing from time to time, recalling the past and discussing the possible future. The evening seemed to pass quickly, and my mood was upbeat. Finally, Denise stood up and said, "Do you mind if I use your bathroom?" "Of course not. You know where she is." With that, she headed to the back of the apartment, walked past the bathroom in the hallway, and entered my bedroom. I was too slow to notice it. After a few minutes, she called out, "Will you help me with this?" Men can be so dumb sometimes. I went back to the bedroom, rounded the corner, and there she was standing in one of my shirts and nothing else. I froze with my mouth open. When a married man meets an almost naked woman, his first thought is, "I must have done something wrong." She laughed. "Is that the way to greet a girl?" She slowly came up to me, put her arms around my neck, and kissed me so that my heart started beating again. While we were kissing, I inhaled her scent, felt the shape of her body under her shirt, felt her squirm slightly, pressing against me. She laughed again, but there was something much more than humor in her voice. "Denise, I know I'm depressed, but you don't have to do this for me." "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for myself. I've wanted you for a very long time, and it broke my heart when that fool clawed at you. I'm not going to stand by and let some other cheater claim you now. I'm claiming you this time." She laughed when she said that. "If you want me to leave in the morning, I'll leave. Today I just want to be interviewed for the position of faithful girlfriend." What can I say? Is there a man in the world who can say no in such a situation? If there is, tell him to seek help from a psychiatrist. I knew my answer and spent the rest of the night proving it to her. I made her breakfast in the morning, and when we left the apartment, I had the biggest, stupidest grin on my face. I wasn't healed, but I was happy. We've been practically inseparable since that night. My divorce went through without any problems, and Denise moved in with us 4 months after that first night. The move was really just a formality. This meant that she had rented out her apartment. She never took anything for granted, but about 2 weeks after our first night together, she asked if she could leave a few things at my house. I gladly agreed. Every time she brought a few more things, she asked in advance, and I agreed. Of course, I knew what she was doing, and I was glad of it. Barb took some of our furniture, making room for Denise's things. I preferred it that way and asked Barb to take even more. I think it hurt her feelings, but I wasn't going to hurt her on purpose. The pain of Barb's betrayal hadn't gone away yet. But Denise treated me, dealt with my moods and self-doubts. Now I had to build a new life, and I was building it with Denise. It took me a long time to get over Barb's betrayal. I tried to build a relationship with Denise as something separate from my failed marriage to Barb, but you carry your past with you in every new endeavor. The turning point came at Denise's Christmas party. We attended it, and I behaved in the best possible way. I wanted to make the best impression on her colleagues. I met her friends, danced with a few of them, and had a beer with their husbands. There was one guy who constantly invited her to the dance floor. His name was Frank. It seemed like every time she came back from the dance floor and sat down at our table again, Frank was there. We were dancing together, and he asked me to cut in. It was getting very annoying, and I began to feel like I could see a slight smirk on his face when he did it. In the middle of the party, I was drinking beer with several husbands. I turned in her direction just in time to see Frank running his hand over her bottom. Then, before I could do anything, there was a loud smack. The sound echoed through the room. She pulled away from his arms and slapped him so hard that the whole room froze. The music stopped. Then my loving and not very shy girl said in a loud voice so that everyone could hear, "No, I'm not going to secretly date you, and if you ever put your hand on my ass again, I saw a flash in her eyes, and before I could move to save him worthless balls, she took a step towards him and hit him with all her might with her right knee. Frank screamed and collapsed to the floor, clutching at his jewelry. Denise turned away from him, came up to me and said, "It's time to leave." To say that our departure did not go unnoticed would be an understatement. We paid tribute to her boss and apologized. He asked to talk to us outside. I was ready for a scolding when he said, "I saw what happened and I'm really sorry. Frank is an ass and I think his days are numbered here. I wouldn't want to fire him right here and now, but I'm going to tell him that his future here is not bright. I will advise him to find another job and I am sure he will leave soon. If you have any more problems with him, please contact me directly." I liked this guy. I liked the colleagues I met, with the exception of Frank, and I felt very good about my relationship with Denise. I think it was that evening that all my doubts disappeared, and I realized that this woman was a real wife. We got married about a year and a half later. We took our time, turned our friendship into love, and built our marriage on trust and honesty. The Epilogue. I never found out the reason for Barb's infidelity. When she left, I had a strong feeling that she felt the impossibility of forgiveness and chose the only way available to her. She moved in with this jerk, but it didn't last long. Men who dance with married women are not suitable for husbands. Denise healed me, and now I'm happy. I wish Barb well and hope she finds what she's looking for. 5 years have passed. Denise and I are married. We have a daughter and a son on the way. She still works for the same company and is moving up the career ladder. We invite her boss and his wife to parties when we get together with friends and neighbors. Steve and Debbie always take part in these meetings too. I'm glad to see that they did it together. Oh yes, we bought the house 2 years ago. It's just a starter home, but it suits us fine. Life is good. I have a wife whom I love and trust completely. She gave birth to 2 children for me and is threatening more. I know she will never betray me, and I know her character, so I just agree with everything she says. Try to wipe that stupid grin off my face and do what I'm told.